Hello again, my friends. Welcome back for another video. This goes out to a friend of mine that asked me about John 3:13. Listen, this is a complicated verse. There is indeed a translation issue, and that's because this verse is very, very hard to translate. And I'm going to make a separate video and attempt to try to explain to you how to translate this verse. But it's so complicated, I can almost guarantee you, you're going to get lost. But I do have another way to help you understand this verse. Brothers and sisters, look at the subject change between verse 12 and verse 13. I turned off the red letters because they had put verse 13 in red letters when Jesus is not talking. The evidence is in verse 13 and 14 that Jesus is not talking after verse 12. Look at the subject change. Jesus is saying, if I have told you of earthly things and you believe not, how shall you believe if I tell you of heavenly things? No man has ascended into heaven, but he that come down from heaven, even the Son of Man which is in heaven. What's the relevance? Do you understand? When I was reading this as if Jesus is still talking. I do not take the credit for what I learned. I learned from a commentary that Jesus quit speaking it in verse 12. And that's why it seems like there's a subject change. Listen again. Jesus is telling Nicodemus that if he can't understand earthly things, he's not going to be able to understand heavenly things. Then he jumps subjects to say, and nobody's ascended into heaven except he that came down from heaven, even the Son of Man which is in heaven. Okay? That don't make no sense. But before you take my word on that, I want you to pay closer attention to what's being expressed in verse 13. No man has ascended to heaven, but he that came down from heaven. Okay, stop. It sounds like no man has ascended to heaven except for the one that came down from heaven. Jesus allegedly is incarnated in the Virgin Mary. That's what Trinity wants you to believe. Jesus came from heaven and entered into a woman. All right? If that is the case, when did Jesus go back to heaven? He's standing there talking to Nicodemus, and he's been alive since birth. He has not yet died. He has not yet resurrected. Perhaps, maybe, Trinitarians might want you to say, oh, this happened in the Old Testament. Jesus is talking about the Old Testament. He's been back and forth. He's been on earth, off earth. He's been floating around for a long time now. Okay, all right. I'm not even going to argue with you on that for a second. I just want to move on to my next point. Is it Trinitarian theology that one person of the Trinity can be everywhere at the same time? Is that part of their theology? I'm just curious. I know that God can be everywhere. They claim that God is three persons. Look at what it says. We got Nicodemus and Jesus standing face to face, and yet the verse says the Son of Man is in heaven. How is the Son of Man in heaven and he's standing right there talking to Nicodemus? Brothers and sisters, red flag, red flag. There is translation issues here, and I don't even know if it's fully biased because it's a hard verse to translate. The Son of Man is not in heaven at the same time that he's sitting there talking to Nicodemus. Also, the Son of Mankind is in heaven. Jesus hasn't ascended to heaven yet as a Son of Mankind. According to Trinitarian theology, he didn't become a man till he was born, and he has not yet died and resurrected when he's talking to Nicodemus. Red flags everywhere, brothers and sisters. Don't be deceived. Don't be deceived. John is jumping subjects here. He ends his encounter talking about Nicodemus and Jesus in verse 12 and picks up and tells us, no man has yet ascended into heaven unless Jesus comes back from heaven, because he is in heaven. No man has ascended to heaven because Revelation 19 has not yet happened. And then John goes on to tell us, even as Moses was lifted up in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. That's a close translation, but that's not exactly precise. When we say must, the Son of Man, it's sounding like subjunctively. It's sounding like a possibility. When in fact, that Greek word that means it is necessary is in the present tense indicative right here. Can I be real with you? I really hate this word. It's so hard to fit sometimes. Look at what it says. In this way was lifted up. It is necessary, the Son of the mankind. Whoa! How are those people understanding each other? I do understand it a little bit, but I have to write it down to get a better understanding. I wrote off to the side the literal translations. I'll do a translation for you in another video on how I translated. But then the correct translation for verse 13 would be, and no one has ascended into heaven unless the Son of mankind who is in heaven descended from heaven. No one goes to heaven. Everybody is asleep right now. Hey, you can have your own theology on that. I'm not going to argue with you about it because it's not going to affect whether or not we go to heaven. It's not salvation based, so it's not worth arguing about. But based on Scripture, I believe when you die, you sleep until the resurrection. And then everybody raises, the dead raises to be judged. Apparently those sealed in Jesus raise first. There's a millennial reign. Then everybody else raises, and they're to be judged by what's written in the books. That's the concept the Bible delivers. I'm not going to argue with you. You can have your own opinion. But the fact is, what's being said is no one's ascended to the heaven unless the Son of mankind has descended from heaven. Then it goes on to say, and as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, it is necessary the Son of mankind in this way was lifted up. We're talking about the crucifixion. John is talking about the crucifixion. Jesus is talking to Nicodemus about earthly things and heavenly things. John picks up and says nobody's been to heaven because Jesus hasn't come back. But the way that the serpent was lifted in the wilderness, it was necessary that Jesus likewise was lifted up. That way, anybody that can look on their sin on the cross, anybody who looked at the serpent on that pole, acknowledged their sin for rebelling against God, and God sent serpents among them, okay? Anybody who looks at Jesus on the cross, they are healed. They receive salvation. That's a lot of figurative speaking. There's more to it than that. I don't think that I could say too much more to bring any more clarity to this. Just look at the red flags in the verse itself. No man's ascended into heaven except the one that came down from heaven, who is actually standing in front of Nicodemus at the same time that he's in heaven as a Son of mankind. Trinitarian theology says that Jesus was not a man till he was born to Mary. So how is it a man is in heaven right now while he's talking to Nicodemus? Oh, brother, what a mess. I hope you guys can see that there's a problem here, and I would not recommend anybody building a theology off of problematic verses. Because what's going to happen in the end is everything is going to crumble. Everything. Because you did not build it on certainty. You build it on uncertainty. Let me make another video for you real quick on how this verse would be translated. Thank you, and have a good day.